Hey everyone, welcome back to Williamson Ridge Outdoors. Today we've got a couple of buckets full of parts and we're standing beside our Kubota M6060. And if you couldn't tell from the intro on the video, we actually have a third function kit for our Kubota M6060. I'm so excited about this because I have been wanting to do this to this tractor for so long. I've got a couple of hydraulic hoses that actually run from the back of the tractor all the way up to the front to be able to run my grapple. And I actually use my rear remote and the lever on the side in order to open and close my grapple, which is not a very convenient way to do it. It works, but as you're working your loader, you've got your hand on your loader stick and you've moved up to whatever you're going to pick up, and once you get there you have to take your hand off the loader stick and reach back and close your grapple. Well, sometimes you might need to make an adjustment with your loader or something in order to get it to pick up that load, and you can't do that at the same time, so it makes it kind of inconvenient. I've made do with it. It's worked, and it's kind of got the job done, but the hoses are just in the way all the time. So I finally ended up finding the third function kit. I actually submitted a video to Neil at Messick. They have this Ask Neil segment that they do on their YouTube channel to where that you can submit these video questions. They'll put them on their channel, and then he will answer your questions and stuff for you. So he did that, and so I contacted them about the part number that he told me on the video and ordered it up. There's not any real good instructions either that you can find to install this, but what I did find was an assembly manual in order to do installation on the LA 1154 front loader, and it has a little section in it about installing the third function on it from the factory. So hopefully that'll be enough information in order to get this thing installed. Messick also did send me a manual too, but it was for an LA 1153 loader, which should be pretty close to the same. But I figured if I take the two manuals that there should be enough information in there to be able to figure it out. Let's get into this. Let's see if we can get this thing installed. I am so excited about getting this on here. I'm afraid this video is probably going to end up being pretty long, so just bear with me. But I'm going to try to get you a good step-by-step of how to install this, because it's hard to find the information and a manual on this of the install instructions. I found this off of a link online from one of the forums, or somebody had asked some questions and it came off of a forum and they still had a link on there for this. This is the assembly instructions for the LA 1154 loader, and like I say, it actually has a section of installing the third function on this loader as you're installing it on the tractor. So I don't know if there'll be differences because this is the install of the loader onto the tractor with that versus the loader already being on there and then having to install the third function. So we may have to work around a few things, but this should be pretty close information in order to get this thing on here. So it says our first step is to attach our solenoid stay to our valve body. So what we're going to do is put this on here with the two bolts. And as you can see, we've got the solenoid stay angled away from the valve body. So step 2 says to assemble the following parts as shown below. And this is the picture that it shows. So you can't really tell what it says by the picture. So what they're showing is that the solenoid valve assembly of where it's at on the tractor, and you can't hardly see that in the picture until you just are looking at the bolt holes and seeing basically that it's telling you what it's showing down here is the solenoid valve assembly. So a little vague on like really good pictures. You kind of put this stuff together, then it should make sense in the end. So as you can see, our valve body is tucked up in there pretty good, or valve assembly. It's actually in behind the plate there where it has the model and serial number. Tucked back here in the back. So it looks like it's actually protected pretty good, but it does hang down a little bit lower than what the bottom of the tractor is. There's normally a metal plate that goes over all this. I actually hooked mine on some brush and doing some stuff I wasn't supposed to be doing, and you know, a sapling got hooked up in there and just tore it off. So our first hose we got to remove actually is this hose right here. This one's the one that runs from the back of the tractor on the inside up to your fitting right here on the top. So I pulled this one loose just to get it out of the way so I could get a wrench to that fitting. So we've got to remove this line completely. So we've got to replace it with our 11.8 inch hydraulic hose. And what we're going to do though is run it from this back fitting to the fitting up here on the back of our solenoid. That took a little bit of finagling to get in there. That little short hose is not quite short enough just to put it in there without, you know, having to bend and twist it, but we got it in there. It's pretty cold out today, so that's probably making a lot of the difference of how hard this is to work with, but we got it in there, and I'll show you a close-up here in a second of where those hoses actually are routing to after I get this second one put on here. But again, from the front side, we've got our 28 inch hose, and this one is just taken loose just to get it out of my way so I can get to this one with the wrench. But we're going to run our 28 inch hose just kind of up and over and in behind the brake lines and in behind the hose that we just put on, and we're going to hook it to our hose line number 1 that we took loose. And this one actually is going to run and make a U shape and go to the inside 90-degree fitting on our solenoid. This is the first hose we took off, and it actually ran to the inside fitting back here going to the back of the tractor. So we took it off completely, and our new hose, our 28 inch straight ends on both ends, are running from this fitting here on the top of our valve assembly and running it basically in a U shape and all the way back around underneath to the bottom right angle, the inside fitting on the valve body, or on the new solenoid. And then our short 11 inch hose is running from the solenoid back to the original one we took off here on the back of the tractor. This one is still the factory OEM line that is on here. Our next line is going to run from the outside 90 that's on your solenoid, and it's going to run up here to this fitting that's on the tank, or goes to the tank. This actually had a cap on it, so we're just going to pull the cap off and then run it to this 90 fitting out here on the solenoid. Now it's a little tight in here, and you've got your linkage in here for your valves and stuff. If you can't hardly run this hose where it's got the 90 on it on the outside of this, because you can't get it to bend tight enough. But if you run it on the inside, then you're against your shifter linkage right here. So we may end up just having to kind of run that and then maybe zip tie it and pull it over against the linkage for our valves and stuff down here, just to make sure it stays off of this shifter linkage. That looks like it's clearing pretty good. But like I say, I may go ahead and just hook a zip tie or something on there just to make sure that it's not rubbing on that, because it is really close, but it looks like it's okay. As whenever I use the shifter, it's not touching anything there, so we should be good. So I'm gonna go ahead and hook this line back up, just mainly so I don't forget it and so it doesn't keep dripping. All right, so I went back and looked at the directions, and in the picture it shows this line on the outside of this linkage. So I went ahead and ran it there just to make sure that I was away from my shifter linkage back here. I'm a little OCD on that. I think it would have been perfectly fine. There's a little bit of a bind on it right there because it's pushing on these linkage lines, but it's not rubbing on moving parts. And I think as this line, whenever it warms up from the hydraulic fluid and stuff, it'll actually just kind of mold and stay in that position and won't really be putting much pressure over there anymore, so it should be good after that. So the next thing we got to do is fit our coupler stay assembly. We're actually going to use the existing bolts in here. We're just going to pull one loose at a time, and that way this thing will kind of somewhat stay in place. So I'm going to take one loose and I'm going to kind of hang it on here and put the nut and stuff back on, then take the other one loose, and then that way this whole assembly, I'm not trying to have to hold the weight up of these hoses and all that kind of stuff. It should kind of support itself on these bolts. So I'm going to hang on to all the hardware right here and keep it exactly the way it is. The only thing that's on the back side of this actually is just a nut. So I'm going to go ahead and take our assembly, and you want your couplers facing out. So we're going to slide this thing in here. I'm going to go ahead and line this hole up. This takes a little bit of trial and error. I'm going to go ahead and pull the top loose because I can't get that to go on there with the top bolt in it. But like I say, all I'm trying to do is to keep this bracket back here with all these other hoses and fittings and stuff hooked to it. I'm trying to keep that thing in place, so I'm not trying to hold all of that together. Right now the bolts are holding that in place, so I think we're going to be good. So as you can see here, we took our bolts out and we used the existing nuts back here on the back. So that adds our connections right here in order to be able to take your loader on and off to have the quick connects on it. All right, so the next thing, we've got our two hoses. They're 25.5 inches long, and we're going to run them from the solenoid up to that new fitting we just installed. All right, so before I attach this up, let me take you under here with me and show you what we got. This is our solenoid, and our hose line number 1 is going to run on the top fitting, and we're going to run it out, and we're going to run it to the inside fitting going up to our quick connects. And hose number 2 is going to fit to the bottom, and it's going to run to the outside fitting of the mount we just put on. So our next step that we're actually doing here is putting our brackets on to mount our solid lines to. So you've got a bolt, you've got a stay, and you've got a collar. So you want your bolt to go through your line stay and then put your collar on there, and then you're going to put that into the pre-threaded hole. And I'm leaving it loose so I have room to get my hose and stuff through there, or to get my metal hard lines through there. So our next step is to hook up our line from our metal tube down to our quick connect. One end of it has a quick connect end. The other end has the thread on end to match up to our solid tube up here. Now the thing is too, we're still trying to match up, you know, from our solenoid down here, we had line 1, and we had line 1 from the output on the solenoid to the input on our quick connect. So we've also got the side or line 1 on our quick connect to run up here so that they match up. So I'm actually starting with line 2 on this because it's on the bottom. And if you connect line 1 first, then it's going to be a little bit harder to get to. So I'm going with line 2, which is the bottom line. And it's also going to be the connection on the outside of the tractor. So as you can see, that gives me room to get in here to tighten this thing up. And line 1 goes right here on the top. So now we're just going to connect them to their respective fittings here on our quick connects. And we can plug our caps together just to keep them clean. So as you can see, we're pretty much just moving from the back of the tractor and working our way up to the front with all these hoses and lines and stuff. And so now our next thing is actually to hook up our hose hitch, they call it. And it's actually just got block offs on it right now. And it's got the fittings on the back side in order to run hoses up here to our hard lines. So back here on the back side of this guard, there's actually 2 bolts on there, and we're just going to take them out. The kit came with 2 longer bolts to go into this part to make up for the difference of the hose hitch. So we're going to be using longer bolts out of the kit. So we got our hose hitch on here, and like I say, we removed the 2 factory bolts, and the kit comes with 2 longer bolts to put in here to make up for this difference of the thickness of the hitch. I was trying to not take both those loose at the same time because I figured something might move in there and it'd be hard to line up back there, and I was right. So it took me a little while to get those lined back up, but I got them in there and they're snug down. So now our next step is actually just to run our hoses from our hard lines down to our hose hitch. So now that we've got our solenoid mounted, we've got all of our hoses and everything ran all the way to the front of the tractor, now it's time to go ahead and start putting the controls on.